योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम. So in the previous session we looked at Indriyajaya, tato animadi pradhānajayaśca, kaya sampat tad dharma anibhagatascha. And then in fact sorry, so the sutra we saw last time on Indriyajaya was grahana swarupa asmita anvayartavatva sanyamad Indriyajaya, because the one I just mentioned, that was a siddhi from the Bhutajaya. So the three sutras before that covered Bhutajaya, which refers to the Prithvi, Ap, Teja, Vayu, Akasha, so the five Panchamahabhutas, sort of the material aspects. And then the previous sutra, 3.47, covered Indriyajaya, which are the instruments through which the subjective entity can reach out to the world. And as part of Indriyajaya, the five aspects of Indriya, which was Grahana, Swarupa, Asmita, Anvaya, and Arthavatva. These five aspects, we looked at them in detail. In fact, we also looked at a very nice definition of what is Indriya. And in that context, we also mentioned that there is so much depth when somebody says Indriya Jaya, whereas the term Jitendriya is often used quite casually to say that, oh, this person has complete control over his senses. But Indriya Jaya is much more than that, and there is the Sayyama on five aspects, all done one by one. So that is what was mentioned in the previous sutra. Today we look at Sutra 3.48, which continues from there and says, tato manojavitvaṃ vikaraṇabhāvaḥ pradhānajayaśca. So there is so much more that comes from Indriya Jaya. And so there are three things mentioned here. So let us look at the terms of the sutra one by one. First is tato, tataha, from or due to Indriya Jaya or from Indriya Jaya. What do we get? Manojavitvaṃ. So we will look at what that means. Vyasa will elaborate in his commentary. Then vikaraṇabhāvaḥ, that is the second. And then pradhānajayaśca. So we will now look at each of these terms, what they mean, when we look at Vyasa's Bhashya. Also a reminder here to the shloka on Hanuman, which is recited quite frequently, so many of you might know. Manojavam marutatulya vegam jitendriyam buddhimatam varishtam. So the first term Manojavam, here it's clearly mentioned Manojavitvaṃ. And then Jitendriyam, so here the previous sutra, which refers to Indriya Jaya, is nothing but Jitendriya. So the Hanuman, as somebody who had Manojavitvaṃ and Indriya Jaya, is quite clear. But whereas when learning about the shloka, we just say complete control over the senses and the speed of the as fast as the mind and so on. here we learn through the technology of yoga, through the system of yoga, what is the depth to those terms and what do they really mean. So tato manojavitvaṃ vikaraṇabhāvaḥ pradhānajayaśca. So now let's look at Vyasa's commentary because it is going to elaborate on each term and we will learn about those. Okay. So Vyasa begins by saying, Kayasya anuttamo gatilabho manojavitvaṃ. So Kayaha means the body. Shariram. What about it? Of that, anuttamo gatilabha, unsurpassed gati. Gati means the ability to go anywhere, which usually is translated as speed or velocity. The ability to go, ability to reach anything. Anuttamo, unsurpassed. So the unsurpassed ability to reach anywhere is anuttamo gatilabha. So kayasya anuttamo gatilabha, that is known as manojavitvaṃ. Java also means speed. So in another text it is elaborated by saying, Sharirasya manovat anuttama gatilabho manojavitvaṃ. Just like the mind is able to go anywhere, reach anywhere, in a moment, the mind can be anywhere. Now getting that same ability in the body, that is known as manojavitvaṃ. So kayasya anuttamo gatilabho manojavitvaṃ, which is elaborated as sharirasya manovad, like the mind. So manovad. Anuttama gatilabha, unsurpassed speed, unsurpassed ability to go or reach, is known as manojavitvaṃ. So from Indriya Jaya, the Siddhi that emerges, among the Siddhis, the first mentioned here is manojavitvaṃ. Vyasa continues. He says, Videhanam indriyanam avipreta deshakala vishayapeksho vrittilabho vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. So what is vikaraṇabhāvaḥ, which is the second Siddhi? So, Vyasa says, Videhanam indriyanam. So what is videha? Videha means vigatani dehat. Okay, so having gone out of the confines of the body, duri bhutani karanani indriyani yasya sayogi vikaranaha. So the karana, so what is this vikaraṇabhāvaḥ, the term? The karana refers to instruments. So here indriyas are instruments. So what is the nature of these instruments? In the case of this yogi who has the siddhi, the instruments are freed from the confines of the embodiment. So they are free to go out away from the body. Now, the ability to have that is known as tasya bhavaha sthitihi avastha vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. So that state that the yogi can reach, that is known as vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. And therefore, that is the direct etymology of the term vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. Now Vyasa elaborates exactly on that. He says videhanam. So the indriyas, so videhanam indriyanam, the indriyas that are now outside of the confines of the physical confines of the body. So they are not limited by the dimensions of the body. So what about those indriyas then? Abhipreta desha kala vishayapekshaha vrittilabha means whatever is desired, whatever is abhishta. So whatever is desired, whatever is being sought for, that kind of a desha kala. So that area, space, kala, that time, and that object, vishaya. So being able to come into contact with that is abhipreta desha kala vishayapekshaha vrittilabha. So getting the ability to do that. So the indriyas of these yogi can go anywhere, anytime, and get in contact with anything. that particular siddhi is vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. So therefore, now through the concept of pratyaksha, laukika pratyaksha or the worldly pratyaksha pramanam is about indriyas directly getting in touch with that object whose knowledge is arrived at by pratyaksha pramanam. Now this yogi, his indriyas have unlimited ability to reach both in space, time, and also vishaya, the object with which they come in contact. And therefore that is the second siddhi coming from indriya jaya, and that is known as vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. So the first one said the body can reach anywhere as fast as the mind can. The second one says regardless of where the body is, the indriyas can reach anywhere, anytime, anything. So that is vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. Then to continue, pradhānajayaśca. So what is this? So pradhana is something that we have seen. That is the term is used for prakriti as a whole, particularly in its initial state before it transforms into all the things that come out of it, like mahat, alankar, bhutas, and so on, all the tattvas. So that term is pradhana. But here now the pradhānajaya means, now as Vyasa says, sarva prakriti vikara vashitvam pradhānajaya iti. So having vashi means having control. So he has vashitvam, that yogi has vashitvam. Now vashitvam in relation to what? It says sarva prakriti vikara vashitvam. So what is this? Prakritischa vikarascheti prakriti vikaraha. So prakriti is a term used for anything that can transform or evolve into something else. So the prakriti, the primordial prakriti, is usually referred to as pradhana, from which all the things come out, all the evolutes come out, like mahat, ahankara, bhutas, indriyas, etc. But with respect to ahankara, mahat is a prakriti, because ahankara arose from mahat. Then with respect to the bhutas, the tanmatras are the prakriti, and so on. So the prakriti is that which has the ability to transform into or to evolve more tattvas. And the vikara is or vikriti is that into which something has transformed. So the result of the transformation, the evolute, is the vikriti. So now Vyasa is saying sarva prakriti vikara vashitvam means all the prakriti and vikriti entities, all the prakritis and vikaras, on them the yogi has control. That is a siddhi. So that is known as pradhānajayaḥ. So these are great siddhis arising from manojavitvaṃ, vikaraṇabhāvaḥ, and pradhānajayaḥ. Now, sometimes the question is asked, how come from indriya jaya something as great as pradhānajaya can come about? And then, so that is also covered in one of the texts. It says, Nanu indriya jaye katham prakriti mahad ahankaranam jaya iti chet. Na, that is the answer. So somebody may raise an objection from indriya jaya, because in the sequence of evolution from prakriti, mahat, ahankara, and then indriyas and so on, indriyas are late in that evolution. So now from indriya jaya, how can you claim that the siddhi, it encompasses mahat, ahankar, and the earlier aspects of prakriti? And that the text answers by saying, indriya rupeshu antima rupatrayat teshamiti. So the answer is, in the previous sutra, there were 5 aspects of indriyas that were considered. And the last 3, which is asmita, then anvaya and arthavatva, refer to the earlier aspects. Asmita, I refer to the ahankara tattva, and then the anvaya and arthavatva refer to the very gunas that constitute the prakriti. And therefore, because those were captured as one of the 5 aspects of Sanyama through which Indriya Jaya was attained. Therefore, the Siddhi encompasses Pradhanajaya as well. So that way, any objection to the Siddhanta is also countered. And therefore, now we have seen all the three terms in the Sutra, tato, manojavitvaṃ, vikaraṇabhāvaḥ, and pradhānajayaśca. Now Vyasa concludes. So first he says, Etas tisraha siddhayaha madhupratika uchyante. So he introduces a certain term that is quite likely used in those times or as part of the Siddhanta, and the term was madhupratika. So these siddhis, he says, were referred to with the technical term madhupratika. Then he says, Etascha karana panchaka rupajayat adhigamyate. So Vyasa also emphasizes anticipating that objection that I just mentioned. How come it is coming from Indriya Jaya that you are getting something as big as Pradhanajaya? So Vyasa is saying, Etascha, these three siddhis, Karana Panchaka Rupajayat. So what is Karana Panchaka Rupajaya? Karana refers to Indriyas, the instruments. The Rupa Panchaka refers to the five aspects that was seen in the previous sutra. So there are five Indriyas and five aspects of the Indriyas. So that is Karana Panchaka Rupajaya. Now from that, this is attained. So Etascha Karana Panchaka Rupajaya Adhigamyante. And with this, we finish this topic of firstly Bhuta Jaya and the three sutras, and now Indriya Jaya and the two sutras. And we look at what that means and how much how many layers of understanding are there when we talk about Indriyas and Indriya Jaya. And then the exalted siddhis that come both from Bhuta Jaya and now from Indriya Jaya. So that covers Sutra 3.48.
So the previous sutra was a discussion on Indriya Jaya. That is by Samyama on the five forms. So the consequence of that Samyama is Indriya Jaya. And Indriya Jaya is a concept that needs to be opened out. Because otherwise, generally, we will think it is Indriya Jaya means one who has conquered senses. And what is our idea of somebody having control over senses is already imagined, and we need not imagine about it. We know what it is sensory control, which is a part of discipline in life, and will and volition, resoluteness, etc., with which the sensory control is imagined by we people. So our concept of sensory control or Indriya Jaya is that somebody is very, very disciplined, somebody is very, very moderate and temperate, and somebody has willpower of the character of iron and steel, and that's how we imagine. So here, that concept is to be opened out, and Indriya Jaya is opened out by this sutra. Because this Indriya Jaya is by way of Samyama on the Pancharupas. And there are other kinds of Indriya Jaya get mentioned in Patanjali's text itself. Like one which we generally consider is as a disciplined life, will, volition, resoluteness, determination. That gives a kind of conquest over senses. So that is a kind of the Indriya Jaya that which is getting mentioned in niyamas. Shaucha, Santosha, Tapa. Swadhyaya, Vijaya, Pranidhana are five niyamas, and tapas gives such kind of superficial and peripheral control. Kayendriya Siddhi, that Kaya Indriya Siddhi, that Indriya Siddhi is of the nature of what we imagine as sensory control or mastership over senses. The other one gets mentioned in Pratyahara Sutra. So by pratyahar, the another dimension of Indriya Jaya gets mentioned. And now here, the third one is getting mentioned. It's samyamatmaka, out of samadhi process. Samadhi process on what? On the pancharupas of Indriyas, grahana, swarupa, aspita, anvaya, arthavatva. And therefore, we can also understand gradation of Indriya Jaya or mastership over senses, conquest of senses. The first one is out of discipline and etc. The second one is out of pratyahara. And of course, then it includes asana, pranayam, yama niyamas, etc. So out of yama niyama, asana, pranayam practices, the pratyahar comes up, and pratyahar gives a yogi another grade of Indriya Jaya. Now this is out of samyama. So this is superlative Indriya Jaya, because it is coming out of samyama. Samyama on pancharupas of Indriyas. Now this samyama results into three-headed consequences. Manojavitvaṃ, which we just now heard, that is attaining velocity of mind. It is worthwhile to understand the concept, velocity of mind. Otherwise, usually we don't bother about it. Velocity, mind has absolute velocity, superlative velocity, which gets mentioned in Vyasa Bhashya, which you just heard just now, anuttama. The predicate anuttama was used. Anuttama gati labha. Anuttama means superlative. That means which cannot be exceeded. That is what this velocity is. So it's almost something like, in scientific language, we can say absolute velocity. And this is indeed incredible. See, even the sun rays take 8 minutes plus to reach the earth, which we people of our generation know very well. The sunlight takes about 8 minutes plus to reach our earth. And for us, the velocity of light is superlative velocity. Nothing is faster than speed of light for us. We cannot imagine anything with greater velocity than the velocity of light, which is 300,000 kilometers per second. That's the velocity of the light, but it takes nearly 8+ minutes. But our mind can go in no time to the sun. We can think of the sun. It doesn't take us 8 minutes to churn out the thought about the sun in the mind. It is instantaneous. It is absolute velocity. So manojavitvaṃ is that velocity given to what? Given to kaya. The body itself is able to assume that velocity. Our mind can go wherever it wants in no time. But here is the case where the body can go wherever it wants to in no time, because it is manojavitvaṃ, the velocity of mind coming to body. And that is therefore an incredible siddhi. Manojavitvaṃ is incredible siddhi, which, as you heard just now, we speak about it with reference to Hanuman. So that is what the manojavitvaṃ is, which is due to Indriya Jaya coming out of Pancharupa Samyama. The other one is vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. Vikaraṇabhāvaḥ is again incredible siddhi that we should understand, that the senses, videhanam indriyanam. See, wherever your body is, your senses are. You can't have your body in one place and senses in another place, because the senses are very much attached to body, very much plugged into the body, and therefore they are inseparable. But videhanam, in a disembodied state, the senses are not arrested by body. And that's the videha. Again, it's a wonderful concept that comes in Yoga Shastra, Videha. We have discussed this on earlier occasions as well. So, with disembodied state, abhimata deshakala vishayapeksho vritti labha. Because we have our body and senses on the body has the velocity that we know. The senses, in case of disembodied state, they would have their own velocity to go. And they would go with the mind. In Videhavastha, disembodied state, the senses would go with the mind. And the mind, just now we heard, has manojavitvaṃ, it has that velocity. Probable, possible, due to the siddhi. And therefore the senses can be sent out. So, it might seem little fanciful idea, but it can be conceived this way. That you can be sitting here and you can send your senses to a distant location for a vision, for envisionment. You can send your ears. You sit in one location, but you can send your ears to distant location. Now, this is not possible, but it is only possible with vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. That's why it's a wonderful concept called vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. So the senses can be separated from the body, and perhaps you can send 5 senses to 5 directions for 5 purposes, for 5 gratifications, which is not possible in a mortal condition of human being. So, it's a marvelous siddhi. That's why it is a siddhi. Vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. The senses can be sent out. Now, today we are able to watch any tournament, any event taking place 10,000 miles away by sitting in front of the television. So today we can understand a century back or 200 centuries back, 2 centuries back, this could not be imagined that you are in one location and you are trying to see something which is 10,000 miles away. Whereas today we are able to do that. We are able to talk to a person who is 10,000 miles away. We are able to see an event which is 10,000 miles away. It doesn't obstruct us. Why? Because of the technology. And it would have been a fanciful thought 200-300 years back or even 100 years back. Somebody saying that I was here and I saw something taking place 10,000 miles away. That would be dubbed as rubbish. But then it is possible today. So in vikaraṇabhāvaḥ is siddhi that it is possible. Because it is disembodied state for senses. That means the senses are with the mind. Now, who perceives and senses all these things? It is the mind, not the body. Body doesn't sense everything. Mind senses. So in vikaraṇabhāvaḥ, with the videha state, videhanam, that means disembodied condition, the senses would be able to go with the mind. And mind goes anywhere. Not only anywhere, mind goes in absolute velocity. It doesn't need time. So, that is the vikaraṇabhāvaḥ vritti labha. So, that's again incredible siddhi that we can understand. And then pradhānajaya. Pradhānajaya you just now heard. Sarva prakriti vikaraṇabhāvaḥ. Control over all the phases of prakriti, the primordial matter, the creative cause. And therefore, like we heard about in earlier occasion with the bhutajaya, the bhutas come under control of a yogi. The yogi is conqueror of bhutas, and we have seen what does it mean. So you should recall that bhutajaya concept, whereas we are all slaves of these elements. Elements are governing us. That is why we want to be in our elements. We can't be doing something to our elements. We want to be fortunate to be in our elements, to be excelling. So, that was bhutajaya. Now this is pradhānajaya. Pradhānajaya means the primordial matter, the basic fundamental creative cause, then you can understand what kind of glory this might be when the entire pradhana, the primordial matter, is under governance of a yogi, or he has the mastership. So this is supreme siddhi in the material realm. No siddhi can be greater than this if the yogi has mastership over very pradhana. That's a supreme siddhi. So that's how these are three glorious siddhis, and you heard how from Indriya Jaya everything can come under control, and there is quite sound logic behind it. If we look into the sutra, and just now heard from Srineet, the 5 forms includes asmita, so ahankar is included, and the buddhi tattva is included, the prayojan is included, and therefore the entire matter is included by Indriya Jaya, which comes out of samyama. Other Indriya Jayas won't give you pradhana jaya. Indriya Jaya coming out of discipline, coming out of niyamas, coming out of pratyahar, won't give you this siddhi. It is only samyamatmaka siddhi, because it is on 5 forms of the senses, and therefore this is supreme material siddhi that is mentioned. And finally, he introduces us to the technical concept of the yogi's level hierarchy called madhupratika. So it's a level. We are familiar with these hierarchies, like somebody is a beginner, somebody is intermediate junior, intermediate senior, and then somebody is advanced, and somebody is senior most. So these are hierarchies with which we are familiar. But then yogis, samadhi prapta yogi, those who have attained samadhi, there are hierarchies mentioned. So this is said to be madhupratika. Madhupratika is the second level in the 4 levels mentioned by Vyasa. The first one is madhumati. Madhu means honey. Honey in the sense that it tastes. So you have to understand the word honey figuratively, not literally, and in physical sense as to what honey is. So prior to these, the siddhis, before the pradhana, this manojavitvaṃ, vikaraṇabhāvaḥ, pradhānajaya, up to this siddhi, other siddhis come under madhumati bhumi. And there are so many siddhis that we have already seen. So that grade of a yogi is called madhumati. This grade of a yogi is called madhupratika. And this is the second plane out of 4. And then there are other levels which are vishoka and samskara shesha. So these are the 4 bhumis which get mentioned in the Yoga Shastra: madhumati, madhupratika, vishoka, samskara shesha. And Patanjali, Vyasa clearly mentioned that this siddhi is madhupratika. So it tells us that although this is supreme siddhi, this is supreme siddhi in material realm, prakrutic realm. This is supreme, and nothing can be exceeding. Nothing can be going beyond this insofar as Prakriti is concerned, pradhana is concerned, matter is concerned, material realm is concerned. So the second one is the supreme in material realm. However, yogi has another 2 rungs to climb up, and they are vishoka and samskara shesha. So these should be deduced, inferred, extrapolated from the whole Shastra. When we read the whole Shastra, we will know how these 4 grades are, calibers are, why are they designated with those nomenclatures. Anyway, there are 4 planes of yogi who has attained samadhi. Otherwise, we consider samadhi attained yogi means the supreme. We don't make any gradations. But the Shastra makes a gradation and it tells us that there are 4 bhumis. And Vyasa opens that inquiry which we are supposed to get into in course of our study of Yoga Sutras. Okay.
Okay. So now we move to the next sutra, 3.49. So the sutra is as follows. sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. So now let us understand what the sutra says. It says sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya. Okay. So firstly, the background. So now that we have seen Bhutajaya and Indriyajaya, we are moving on to a different aspect. And we are still sort of continuing with that line of thought. So Yogavartika elaborates on this. It says that evam grahya grahana sanyamayoho siddhim uktva grihitra sanyamasya siddhim aha. So we have looked at the sanyama and siddhi firstly with respect to the grahya. So what is grahya? Grahya refers to the knowable, the graspable. So something that we can know, something that we can grasp with our senses. So that refers to the first among the set, which is the bhutas. So bhutas is the prithvi, aap, tej, vayu, akash, etc. So when we looked at bhutajaya, we were referring to the grahya. Second was grahana. Grahana means the grasping, the act of grasping, the act of knowing, which refers to the instrument of knowing and the instrument of grasping, which was the indriyas, which we just looked at. So that was indriyajaya. So the sanyama with respect to the grahya and the grahana, having seen that, so that evam grahya grahana sanyamayoho siddhim uktva, having talked about that, gruhitra sanyamasya siddhim aha. Now we look at the sanyama with respect to the grihita, one who knows, one who grasps, the grasper, the knower. So we are going to that subjective entity with this sutra and the siddhi with respect to that. So grihitra sanyamasya siddhim aha. Now we are talking about that. So this is to set the what is known as sangati, the continuity with respect to the context for the sutra. So the sutra is sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya. So what is sattva? Sattva means antakaranam, which is the inner instrument, the chitta, or also referred to as buddhi. And here it is specifically the chitta and buddhi in its purest form, and Vyasa will tell us what that is. But the shuddha buddhi, which is completely pure of all impurities, that is what is referred to here as sattva. And then there is purusha. Purusha is the seer, is the inner chitti shakti, which we have seen and talked so much about, so we know what the term refers to. So now, anyata means the difference. So the sattva in its purest form, and we have seen this earlier, in one sense is very similar to, but in another sense is extremely different from the purusha, because the sattva, the chitta in its purest form, is still is a evolute of Prakriti. It is made up of sattva, rajatama, etc. Even though the rajatama have been suppressed and it is largely sattva in its purest form, it is still material. It is not swayam prakasha, so it is still jada, etc. Which means it still needs somebody to illumine it for knowing process, whereas Purusha is Chiti Shakti, it is the knowing substance, it is unchanging, it is Nitya, it's the same forever. So therefore there is extreme difference but also high similarity. Now, in the state where the similarity is high, because the sattva is extremely pure, when one realizes, that is anyata khyati, one which is also known as viveka khyati, the discrimination, the fact that they are different becomes evident. Anyata khyati matra. So what is this matra? It is again elaborated as matra shabdena sanyama rupa khyatir labdha. So here it is the use of the term matra says that this is khyati, not just normal knowledge, but the sanyama rupa knowledge, knowledge in the form of sanyama and samadhi. Because as we know, in the first chapter we had seen in the samadhi, there is a artha matra nirbhasa, in the sense that that knowledge becomes that is the cognitive content of the chitta, that is the knowledge in the chitta, without even being aware of the knowledge. So one is not, the chitta is not aware, it doesn't say that I know. Even that aspect goes away and purely the knowledge remains. We had elaborated on this quite a bit when looking at the first chapter. So that is artha matra nirbhasa. So here the matra is referring to that, to say that there is the artha matra, and therefore this is khyati or knowledge coming from the sanyama process. And then we know that sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya. So as a result of this, and the sanyama is included when it says khyati matra, there sanyama has happened, and the difference between sattva in its purest form and the purusha is still clearly identified and realized, and that is in fact the content, the cognitive content of the chitta, or the cognitive support, alambanam of the chitta. Then what happens? This sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ. So this is what is referred to as kriyaishvarya. Aishvarya, lordship, in terms of the kriya. So sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ. So it is a superintendence. Okay, it is as we say, we are here, some person is the superintendent officer, or some deity is the superintendent deity. So here the yogi gets this, he becomes the superintendent of everything, sarva bhava. So everything that is knowable, graspable, everything that exists, of that, the adhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ, the ability to reside and control and have lordship over it. So that is sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ. So this is kriyaishvarya. And then sarvajñātṛtvaṃ cha. So this is the knowing, the knowledge of everything. So this is jnāneshvarya. So aishvarya with respect to knowledge and knowing. So both these come together. Sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ and sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. Both of these completely arise as a siddhi to a yogi who has khyati or realization through sanyama. So that is khyati matra of the sattva purusha anyata. The sattva in its purest form, and then the purusha, and the clear realization of the difference between them. And that gives the yogi, as per the sutra, the sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ, lordship over each and everything, each and every process, and sarvajñātṛtvaṃ, the knowledge of everything, all knowingness, omniscience. So that is what the sutra talks about.
So, as I said a few moments back, that we considered siddhi in the material realm. Prakriti, prakrutika, prakriti vishayaka. Those siddhis. And now, therefore it means that there is something transcendent, and that is spiritual entity. Now this is the siddhi which is coming in the spiritual entity. And you just heard Srineet mentioning about Vijnān Bhikshu giving sambandha bhashya there, showing the relationship between what was discussed and what is being discussed now. So, if you recall, the samapattis were mentioned of three classes: grahya samapatti, grahana samapatti, grahitru samapatti. Therefore, grahya samadhi, grahana samadhi, and grahitru samadhi. So far we considered the grahya and grahana samapattis and samadhis. And that is the material realm, that's the prakritic realm, because prakriti is constituting grahya as well as grahana. And thing to be noted, if you recall, this was mentioned earlier by us, that these indriyas are not just necessarily jnanendriyas, but all indriyas. Because indriya is a concept that comes in yoga philosophy as a wider scope of meaning. Sharirendriyas, Jnanendriyas, Karmaendriyas, Antarendriyas, Manasendriyas, Antakaranendriyas. They are all indriyas. And all those indriyas have 5 forms. But as an example, to conceive and understand, we usually have cognitive senses, Jnanendriyas, in forefront, and we try to understand the Pancharupas. But here, the Indriya Jaya itself means all the Indriyas. So they are all made up of Prakriti. And they are classed as Grahya and Grahana. And therefore, that was mentioned as the material realm. Material in the sense, Prakriti. Now, this is one which is trying to touch the other one. And that is spiritual realm. That is why the sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya concept has come, Purusha has come here. And it is distinction between Sattva, which is Prakriti, and Purusha, which is the other one. Anyata-khyati is discriminate discernment. And then the Siddhi mentioned as sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ and sarvajñātṛtvaṃ. So this is that other class of Siddhi, transcending material prakritic realm. And little intriguing point to be also worth mentioning, that our pronoun I, our mind, which we think are subjective entity, mind is said to be subjective entity, but the mind is objective entity as well. Mind is knowable. Mind is also instrumental entity. So, in mysticism of our embodiment, this manas, mind, which we usually term as subjective entity, it is objective, it is instrumental as well as subjective. And our sense of I also gets classed into grahya, grahana, grahitru. So, our aham is knowable, the aham is knowing entity, and aham is also knower entity. This is that mysterious thing that happens in our embodiment, in the very process of constitution of our embodiment. The pronoun I, otherwise empirically, is considered a subjective entity. But in spiritual process, the aham also becomes objective entity, instrumental entity, and subjective entity. And the subjective entity is more close to the core condition, while the other two are not. And now this is in the internalization process or antarbukhi of yoga. The Purusha is subjective entity. And therefore it is grahitru samapatti class. And valuable kind of input has come from Vignaj Bhikshu's comment, which you heard just now, that the grahitru class of samadhi is being now discussed. And therefore this is the other one. While on the former consideration, it was grahya and grahana, bhuta jaya, indriya jaya. So grahitru, grahana, grahya must be at the back of the mind, and now we should understand it is grahitru samadhi samapatti, grahitru samadhi, and samyama, where this aspect is coming in, subjective aspect is coming in, grahitva aspect is coming in. So that's the other kind of siddhi that we are now going to look at. Okay.
Okay. So now that we have looked at the sutra, since the bhashya, it is best to be looked at together. Let us take up the bhashya in the next session. So we leave today's session at a sort of a enchanting place where the grihitra sayama of the subjective entity, sattva, the buddhi sattva in its purest form, and the purusha, which is chitti shakti, which is nitya, unchanging, eternal, and the realization of the difference between them through the Sanyama process, sattvapuruṣānyatākhyātimātrasya, and then the great siddhis of having the superintendence over each and everything, so sarvabhāvādhiṣṭhātṛtvaṃ, and then knowledge of each and everything, sarvajñātṛtvaṃ, as that great siddhis arising from that. And Vyasa's bhashya, of course, will elaborate on it and make things clear. Okay. Let us recite the slokas on Guruji and stop for today. Vaijñānikam pravaktritva आसनेषु कलाविदम् योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञम् वन्देऽहं सुन्दरं गुरुम् योगवृक्षो हि लोकेऽस्मिन् यत्प्रेरणेन वर्धितः योगाचार्यगुरो तुभ्यं सुन्दराय नमो नमः. Thank you.
Namaskar all of you.